이거 씨발 합자인 게 뭐야? 아니 우리가 과학만을, 수학만을, 기술만을, 공학만을 공부한 이유가 뭐야? 그거 외에는 다 알기 때문이지. 중요한 건 뭐야? 아니 아니 왜 책이 1000권이나 필요해? 지금 뭐 몇천 권은 아니어도 1000권 이상을 읽었겠다. 아, 왜 그렇게 필요하냐고. 책을 읽었으면 자기가 멍청하다는 거야. 멍청하니까 읽지. 똑똑한 사람은 책을 읽지 않아. 왜? 아니까. 아, 책을 왜 읽냐? 병신이니까 그러는 거야. 그러니까 어떤 지식이 있으면 그 지식을 한 권 안에 압축을 해야지. 압축을 하는 게 아니라 한 권 안에 모으라고. 이제 박문호라는 사람이 있어. 그 사람이 이제 책을 쓰는 이유가, 아니 졸라 많이 공부를 해도 어떤 책은 저지라라, 어떤 책은 저지라고 뭐 하나 조직이 안 돼 있다. 그래서 이 책을 썼다라고 하는데, 방금 전에 이제 그걸 보기 전에 녹화해서 말을 했었지. 보지 않아도 알아. 왜? 그래야만 하니까. 아, 책이 족 같은 거야. 아니 뭐 책을 읽어. 멍청하니까 책을 읽자니. 중요한 건 책을 읽으면 더 멍청해진다는 거야. 뭐야, 좋은 책이 아닌 거지. 책이야 씨발 서점에 졸라 많지만 10만 권 있다 치자, 100개는 무조건 가치가 있을 거야. 그러나 1000개는 모르겠어. 그거는 확실하게 말할 수 있어. 어 10만 개 중에 1000개는 뭐야? 1%야. 그것도 확실하게 가치가 없다고. 확실한 게 아니라, 확실하지 않은 게 아니라 확실하게 가치가 없다고. 100개에서 1000개 사이겠지. 0.1에서 1% 사이인 거야. 1%가 아니라. 뭐야, 책을 읽으면 99는 병신이라는 거야. 누구나 책을 읽을 수 있지. 책을 고르는 게 제일 중요해. 그건 뭐야, 책을 네가 쓰라고. 책에다가 평가를 하지 말고 네가 쓰라고 책을. 수학에 대해서 공부를 하는데, 수학이라는 모든 것들이 만든 그 거대한 피라미드부터 시작해서 씨발 농사를 하는데, 씨발 제가 어떻게 움직이고 그 주기를 계산하는데 얼만큼 지나가는데, 그래서 그게 천문학이 아니라 수학이야. 그러니까 그걸 하는데 결국 그런 거 덕분에, 그리고 씨발 땅을 나누고 밭을 갈구는데 씨발 그게 토지가 지금 얼만큼 양이 있고 그게 가로 세로가 얼마나 되면서 그 높이까지 얼마나 지고 씨발 물을 얼마나 줘야 그게 평균적으로 침투가 잘 되는지, 그거를 네가 좀 알려고 했던 거야. 가스로 압력을 버리는데 좀 씨발 저건 공학이 아니라 수학이야. 공학에서 수학이 사용돼, 과학에서 수학이 사용돼. 저건 수학이 그걸 만드는 거지. 수학은 이론이고 공학과 과학 이런 것들 기술들은 전부 다 적용이야. 적용은 누구나 할 수 있지 씨발. 그걸 알아야 돼. 일을 하는 게 중요한 게 아니라 어떻게 일을 하는가가 중요한 거야. 근데 중요한 건 수학에 대해서 그 모든 학문을 배울 때, 아니 수학책을 지금까지 30권 40권 읽으면 뭐해? 조직이 안 돼 있잖아. 수학에 대해서 뭘 하냐는 부분은 씨발 문제를 내고 어떤 것을 대화를 할 때 네가 지식이 튀어나온 게 자극, 외부의 자극에 의해서 나와서 만들어진 거지. 절대로 네가 주도적으로 네가 알고 있는 수학에 대한 모든 지식을 처음부터 끝까지 전부 다 자극받지 않고서도 처음부터 다 말할 수 있는 게 없어. 왜? 조직이 안 돼 있기 때문이지. 인간이 뭐 항상 지금까지 말했었지. The human cannot remember its entire knowledge unless the relevant stimulations are inflicted upon as a stress test, and then and only after that has it possible has it can it done can it do. Unless it is stimulated upon, you cannot. Okay, you cannot. Knowing a science is like a wisdom. So having a knowledge. 그러니까 수학이라는 게 있는데, 중요한 건 수학책을 30개를 읽어도 결국 수학이 어떤 개념이 왜 만들어졌는지, 지금 이상한 숫자나 뭐 공식 같은 허튼 수작을 시도하지 말고, 그 공식을 어떻게 만들게 되었는지, 그 공식이 중요한 게 아니라 생각이 있기 때문에 공식을 만든 거고, 실제 지식은 사람의 뇌에 있는 거지 책에 있는 게 아니야. 그 뇌를 만들기 위해서 네가 경험했고 거기서 생각을 하게 된 그 기원이 뭐냐고가 중요한 거지. 공식을 외우지 말고 네가 공식을 창조해. 책을 읽지 말고 책을 쓰라고. 결국 어떤 경험이, 어떤 것이 그 창조를 만들었는가. 뉴턴은 기존에 있는 수학의 도구로는 저거를 만들 수가 없어서 저 친구가 운동을 하는데 저게 직선도 아니고 곡선이라서 한번 저걸 어떻게 생각을 해볼까 하다가 만들게 된 거야. 그런 경험이 있었기 때문에 그런 거지. 중요한 건 그 경험이란 것이 지금까지 40억 년, 138학년이라고 하는 그 138년도 아니고 그렇게 많은 것들이 해왔던 그 과정 속에서 만든 나름의 법칙과 그 상호작용을 우리가 어느 정도 보면서 만들어진 게 지금까지 수학 지식이지. 그런 것들을 모두 발견을 하고 만들고 해서 결국 발견이라는 것이 발명을 만드는 거야. 네가 거기 있는 지식을 아니까 down dissect, down deep down, down dissect 그걸 해서 결국 뭐야? 새로운 구조를 만드는 거야. 자연이 해왔던 것처럼. 저기 원숭이가 또 이제 담배를 피는데 자기가 담배를 핀다는 사실을 모르기 때문에 저러는 거야. 자기가 담배를 핀다는 사실을 안다면은, 그리고 진짜로 안다면은 그럴 수가 없기 때문이지. 이렇게 단순한 거냐고? 단순한 게 아니라 사실이야. 이거 말고는 답이 없어. 중요한 거는 이해도야. 이해도. 얼마나 이해하는가 중요하지. 이해를 하는가 중요한 게 아니라 중독자가 자기를 중독자라고 생각할까 이 개새끼야. 자, 수학이라는 학문을 배울 때 배우는 게 중요한 게 아니라 뭘 배워 미친 새끼야. 배울 건 아무것도 없지. 중요한 건 뭐야? 그 경험이 어떤 게 있었는가를 알아야 돼. 네가 만약에 수학을 발전시키고 싶으면은 족같은 직업들을 만들고 족같은 경험들을 하고 이상한 것들도 해보면서 그게 경험이 그 수학을 만들었던 거야. 결국 경험이란 것은 단순한 시뮬레이션의 집합이고 그것들이 다양하게 중첩이 되어서 만들어진 거야. 그게 지식의 집합이지. 경험과 실험 없이는, 경험과 실험에서 험은 아마 같은 걸 거야. 어떤 것들을 과정을 진행한다는 뜻이겠지. 경험과 실험이 없이는 지식이 만들어질 수가 없어. 왜? 지식이 뭔데 그러면? 경험과 실험이 없는 지식이 뭔데? 존재가 없는 지식이 뭔데? 네가 태어나서 30살, 40살, 70살 얻으면서 지식이 쌓일 수 있는 이유가 뭔데? 누군가는 경험을 하기 때문이지. 경험 없이 얻을 수 있는 지식은 없어. 그게 아니라 경험이 지식을 창조하는 거야. 지식의 엄마가 그거지. 지식의 기원이 그거야. 결국 책을 많이 읽는 거나 경험을 많이 하는 거나 본질적으로 똑같아. 그러니까 논리적으로 똑같은 거지. 경험을 했던 친구가 책을 썼으니까. 근데 중요한 건 뭐야? 경험을 하기 위해서는 엄청나게 많은 비용이 들어. 워런 버핏은 그걸 뭐라고 해? 값비싼 비용을 치르고 교훈을 얻었다고 하지. 교훈을 얻는 데는 이제 많은 방법이 있고 자기가 경험을 통해서 하는 방법이 있고 다른 친구가 시뮬레이션을 통해서 경험을 한 것을 통해서 얻을 수 있는 방법이 있고 결국 책을 많이 읽었던 친구는 정확하게 생각을 했다는 가정 하에는 그만큼 많은 경험을 쌓은 친구들이 논리적으로 기술한 그 모든 분석 자료들을 자기가 수천 년에 해당하는 그 똑같은 기간의 경험을 살지 않고서도 그것을 이해할 수가 있다는 거지. 근데 그게 진짜로 책을 정확하게 잘 읽을 뿐만 아니라 책 자체가 좋아야 돼. 누구나 읽을 수 있지. 그리고 생각도 엄청나게 잘할 수 있어. 근데 그것은 좋은 책에 의해서 만들어져. 책을 많이 읽으면 멍청해진 이유가 그거야. 그건 진짜 책이 아니기 때문이지. 자, 어떤 책이 있을 때 그 책을 이제는 만들어야 되고 어떤 사람이 이제 20년 동안 학습을 하면서, 즉 그 사람이 70살이든 80살이든 혹은 30년 40년 동안 학습을 하면서 해왔던 많은 것들의 일부분을 이제 책으로 써. 그럼 너는 그 만약에 10년치의 경험이라고 하자. 그거를 뭐 한 달 안에 그 책 한 권을 한 달 안에 읽고서 책 하나를 한 달 안에 읽으면 엄청나게 빨리 읽는 거지. 그걸 읽고서 10년의 그 경험을 획득할 수 있는 거야. 근데 중요한 건 뭐야? 10년의 경험을 획득할 수 있을 정도로 그 책을 정말로 잘 써야 한다는 거지. 책을 잘 못 썼으면 10년에 씨발 구멍이 숭숭 뚫려가지고 씨발 뭘 알고 있어도 씨발 그 과정이 거의 순서가 없어. 그 논리가 뭐가 안 맞춰진 거야. 뭐야 읽더라도 손실인 거야. 좋은 책은 한 달 동안 읽을 수밖에 없어. 나쁜 책은 씨발 10분밖에 안 걸리지. 나쁜 책은 읽는데 10분밖에 안 걸려. 왜? 안 읽거든. 눈으로 쳐 읽는 게 중요한 게 아니라 생각을 하는 게 중요해. 씨발 족같은 하얀색 바탕에 씨발 낙서를 하나 원숭이가 타자를 치나 씨발 씨발 잉크로 젖지랄하거든. 씨발 그건 지식이 아니야. 그 언어는 그 어떤 것도 의미하잖아. 언어로 정보가 대응되고 그 정보를 네가 실제로 뇌에서 실제로 연결할 때 그게 지식인 거야. 책은 지식이 아니야. 지식을 옮긴 거지. 읽는 게 중요한 게 아니라 눈가락을 굴리는 게 아니라고. 손가락을 움직이고 눈가락을 굴린 게 아니라 뇌를 움직이라고. 그래서 책을 읽는데 한 달이 걸리는 거야. 훌륭한 친구는 책을 1년에 걸쳐서 읽지. 왜? 그게 중요하다는 걸 아니까. 그리고 훌륭한 친구는 훌륭한 책을 만들고 발견하고 쓰고 읽고 무엇보다 찾을 줄 아니까. 서점에 도서관에 족같은 책이 씨발 수십만 권 있어도 가치 있는 책은 0.1에서 1% 사이 그 정도밖에 안 된다는 걸 알아야지. 병신을 가려내는 거, 허튼 것을 채내는 거. 자, 이제 많은 책을 읽는데 가치가 없어. 그냥 가치가 없는 거야. 대학교 서적은 그 어떤 책들 중에서 가장 밀도가 높아. 그리고 사실 가능성이 엄청나게 높지. 왜? 동료 교수가 감독하니까 그것만큼 가치 있는 건 없어. 동료 교수가 씨발 눈알에 불초리를 켜고 아니면 불초리에 눈알을 켜고 엄청나게 감독을 하는 거야. 그럼 이제 사실인 거지. 동료 평가를 마친 논문은 사실 가능성이 급격하게 높아지지. 결국 그 책을 통해서 얻을 수 있는데 대중과학서나 다른 과학서가 아니라 과학에 대해서 대학교 책을 읽으면은 엄청나게 가치가 있지만 중요한 건 뭐야? 거기에는 그 발견을 그 발명을 공학과 기술이라면 혹은 어떤 수학적 개념을 기술하는 그 이유를 만들었던 경험을 기술하지가 않아. 왜? 몰라. 네가 병신인 거지. 대학교 책을 그렇게 만들면 안 돼. 중요한 거는 공식이 중요한 게 아니라 그 공식이 왜 만들어지는가 알아야 돼. 그 왜 만들어지는가 알기 위해서는 수학을 가지고 씨발 허튼 수작에 씨발 하얀색 바탕에다 볼펜을 가지고 연명을 떨 게 아니고 생각을 하고 경험을 하라고. 네가 밖에 나가서 달리고 야구를 하고 축구를 하는 게 대학교에서 엿을 먹는 것보다 훨씬 맞아. 왜? 대학교는 가짜고 경험은 진짜거든. 대학교에서 진짜 경험을 만들어내면 수식이 아니라 대학교 안에서도 실험을 해야 돼. 알았어? 밖에 나가라고 족같은 새끼야. 모든 지식은 밖에서 만들어졌어. 그게 이제 헛똑똑이와 진짜 똑똑이를 만드는 거지. 어떤 할아버지는 어떤 할머니는 굳이 그렇게 대학교에서 훌륭한 교육을 받지 않아도 많은 걸 이제 알 수가 있어. 비록 정확한 거 정교한 기술은 못하지만 거의 대부분의 판단에서 헛똑똑이 대학교에서 공부하는 친구보다 훨씬 더 많은 옳은 결정을 내리지. 왜? 첫째, 지식이 진짜니까. 둘째, 지식이 많으니까. 즉 경험을 많이 했으니까. 경험을 많이 한 건 누구나 할 수 있어. 근데 중요한 건 그게 진짜냐는 거야. 책을 읽으면 씨발 그게 지식이 될까? 아니지. 네가 그걸 진짜로 경험하고 느껴야 돼. 자, for what we refer to as physics, like physics, okay? For the movement, from the essence and its interaction as to the movement, from the core of its object's essence to the application, for interactions of those objects, we call as physics, whose purpose is to analyze all logics of all things, like mathematics. Physics and mathematics are just a different name, but essentially the same thing. So the for like what we call nature. Nature means not the earth, not the mother nature for what we normally refer. But the nature means the governing law, principle, governing effect that really exists on the movement, like a centripetal fugal, gravity, friction, balance, angular momentum, parabola, absorbing the force, trajectile. Those are very much. For those subdivisions for into different kind of forces on the movement for generalized form is very important. And do you know the TV show named Science of Stupid in streaming in Disney Plus for 8 seasons, spanning over 100 episodes? Those examples of failure are made what? When you are doing an operation on the operation to target, the operation for its first inception to the end for its procedure, logics are required to accurately execute that, like a soldier on a warfare. Soldier must not make any mistake, because when it does, it will pay a price by its own life. Okay? So when in a warfare, soldier makes the most responsible on every and all actions made in the battleground. Like that principle, it has to make a logic that fits on the purpose of the operation for its procedure to meet the requirement for what logics are properly has to be required. When it fails to meet the logic for its discrepancy, when you are making an operation, you go execute. But when you're doing so, for its procedure, some part of it doesn't fit on its essence, so it fails for the precision target. So it is just understanding for what forces, what logics are required to properly execute the operation. And when it fails, it fails. Failing logic, failing operation. It's just consequently to do so. And for the proper operation, what is required is like a man who is designing like a James Webb telescope, which cannot be repaired or any altered as soon as it was made and launched. Okay? It has to calculate all the impactable forces, variables for like I heard like 300, 400 variables that can have a possibility to have any failure. When it does, the next procedure doesn't really matter because it cannot operate any further from the point on. So it has to really calculate for what are the requirements, what can happen on that operation. So it is just knowing the logic. And when the logic to advance, not just making a requirement given by the nature, given by the space, given by the forces, okay? You are making a adjustment, a precision target to meet the logic to operate the mission successfully. And when you do know all its logics for what are required to have a certain operation be successful, you have to make your own logic for like an ideal playground where the other logics are required to do so. You are designing hard for making that James Webb telescope because it has to be perfectly predicted Okay, that's like an almost impossible job because as soon as it launched, it cannot be repaired and right from it. Oh, bloody hell. Now, oh, sucking hell. Now and since. Even when you're riding a bike or having a flight or having a centripetal force, having a car, what factors are included on that procedure? And of course, have to make your own, making a structure, simulations, experiments that creates or requires some other forces that are not in existence of nature for either it be not have been simulated yet or it's just a novel thing. I really love it. You are creating a new passage of mathematics, new passage, new subdiscipline of physics because there's a new force to have to be operated on specific structure to invent on. I really love it because you're not just following the pre-existing ones, okay? Of course, it just is discovering, okay? Discovering a new realm. Unknown knowledge is like a creation, okay? It cannot be really differentiated from A to B. And of course, that has to be created for novel structures which requires or creates, okay? For either B necessitates a some inventive logic to make that structure organization possible, okay, to be feasible to operate. I really love it. Learning physics is very important, and of course, not just following that principle, but also making new situations that require another imaginative ones, which add another logic. I really love it. From seeing the diverse failures of Science of Stupid for the series, when you're to do some operation, you have to know exactly for what, okay? Forces are required, logics are required to exactly execute that operation in precision successful. Almost all of those failure videos now from this one, I would rather prefer the structure of French. Car, red car. Failure videos of failure videos that are executed, yeah, from the rather experienced one, most of which, okay, having a certain experience, and they evolve from learning the failure of those experiences for like a review and what was wrong. So knowing on the specific structure what are required to operate better. It's the development, okay? It's the development procedure. Development procedure. I love it. And having less mistake, meaning more thinking. Learning from 100 mistakes precedes and events is faster from exact learning, but which consumed thousands of mistakes. Think more, less failure. Just yeah, explore more, make new structure on your own, create new one, which requires the imaginative other logics to really create for the contents that are not written in the previous history of simulations. You simulate more, add a new passage on the discipline of those logic, new kind of logic. Now and as the machine advances, the precision, okay, more sophisticatedness is a criterion for controlling meticulously, delicately on its operation. For its meticulous, real precision is just a, it's just it's saying the finest control. When the one operates just a vehicle, but it operates like 20,000 kilometer per hour, 2,000 kilometer per hour. It has to meticulously operate because the faster it goes, the the more impact force will it generate, and also for the maneuver of its movement, it requires more. It requires more controlled, more confined, more accurate control, more making a factors that are engaging in that operation for the constituents as those factors. And when you make a extremely on those criterion factors, for either it be less friction or more friction, the hardest friction or the slightest friction, or the fastest speed, or the most gravity or the most centripetal force. When the one accelerates, makes more intense extreme on the factors that are engaging in the operation, which requires more precision to operate that mission to be successful. That is a criterion for how precise, how accurate your operation is. Meaning, like everybody can operate in 50 mile per hour for its vehicle, but 100 mile per hour, oh, that's okay. That necessitates more precision of its control. Accurate, but precise on its accuracy. Okay, being more selected target, sophisticated, more like 150 mile per hour. Oh, fucking hell. It of course has a devastating price when it fails. But if it doesn't fail, and as not to fail, it has to operate meticulously compared to the other options that are in lower speed. Yeah. Reading a lot of books, seeing a lot of observations, experiencing a lot of experiments. Now, all animals, including monkeys, didn't have, and now, same applies to now, present, don't have any need to do more than eating and surviving. Okay? Life, what we call in general life, don't have any purpose. There's a reason of why it took 4 fucking billion years to make something like the highest intelligent one, which is just a fucking human who doesn't know its presence, who doesn't question its behavior, who doesn't know what it think it does know, who doesn't doubt on what it think it knows. The highest intelligence on the fucking planet for spanning over fucking 4 billion years, it resultantly made a fucking stupid monkey who also likes to eat and just survive and nothing more than that, except of which doesn't and don't have any need to do any further than that. Now, because the what we call evolution doesn't and didn't and all don't have any purpose to do specifically for a certain route to make something, but just to survive for what only had survived, did survive, and that is the now one that survives now, and it does exactly the same only to survive. which makes the progeny who also wants to survive. Now, more than that, it doesn't have any need to. Okay, more than surviving, it doesn't need to do. Now, it's just a game of naming and doesn't require any gaming, but for the core, the process of first emergence of life to the ever fucking billion years of evolution, it didn't have and don't have any purpose but to survive. No, it doesn't have any purpose. But what had survived one did survive, who had more aspiration, more need to, more desperation to survive, who desperately needed ate more, who desperately wanted to survive, did survive. And that is the exact trait that the progeny had been inherited. Now, for that, only what had, yeah. Even fucking surviving wasn't any in the purpose, since it didn't have any purpose, but made in random fucking literally eternal experiments of combination, one of which had made a succession, one of which had made a progeny, one of which had made a clone replicating itself. It started something, a process which doesn't have any purpose but to do what it did before. Exactly what it did before. No purpose. At some days, for another experience, for eternal experiments, some did survive. Compared to the other one who died. Some did survive compared to the other one. At that point of time, resulted by that dying, living process, and the only living one can make a progeny, which means over time of simulations, the one who survived resultantly survived. Well, it's just a logical thing. But for the one who did survive, compared to the other one, well, really, just survived. But as the competition goes intense compared to the past time when just no purpose, survive or not, live or not made, but the competition goes intense. The competition for surviving was made. Well, it was made because the survived one can only make the one who survives, and that will make the one who survives. Meaning, the wanted man, the man who wanted a surviving more than other peers, other compadres, the unit who had wanted more desperately for eating, surviving, made its life, made its course of existing process. That is the logic of competition, and who lives and who dies for the survival. Made its process, but we are not about asking and questioning about how the logic structure of how competition was made and how the died one, lived one made its difference for making the eager to survive, the one who had a more desperation, the more need to survived more than the one who did not. It is not the question we're asking about, not what the one we are in question. But as resultantly, the survived one survived, and the one who had more need, urge, eager to survive, more to eat, more to secure, more to hunt, more to defend, more to survive, did survive well because it conformed the logic of survival on its system. They operated well. Well, but not as much as we imagine to be. Well, because as including the fucking human species, the fucking another kind of monkey, all animals around the world don't need to do or think, plan anything but just eating and surviving. Just its purpose is just survive as what the ancestor did, and since the beginning of life it didn't have any purpose and made a process without planning, and just was an interaction of materials, and it just is now. Even though it looks like a cheetah, it looks like a cockroach, it looks like a butter fucking fly, it is just a material who doesn't think. It's just a combination, more complex structure, but in a sense, a material where what the gene controls. And the gene doesn't think. The gene just only executes for what it had been, and it had been, and will have been. Okay? Because it has no purpose, and the gene who survived, it just survived with no purpose, but it knows something that struggling more, eagering more, being strong more, makes a survival. It just knows how to survive by the experiments of the dead one, but it's very precious cost. For it knows just something, but it doesn't have any purpose. It just knows how to survive, which wasn't also made from its own initiative experience, but a passive experience, which made a lot of costs and billions of years of time. Yes. A fucking shit, even the highest controller gene doesn't think, do not have any purpose. For that, of all those millions of species existing in the fucking around the world of Earth, the only species the one can think and plan and imagine is just a fucking another kind of monkey, which is called a fucking human. But most of which don't have any. Just another kind, type, shape of fucking animal. Now, because of that fact, from the origin of life, didn't have any purpose and still doesn't have any purpose. That's a fucking desperation. But right making at this time, the one who thinks for what the definition, the deepest research of learning is, and what the knowledge of life that attains with risking its own life would really mean. Exploring how the knowledge has to be, not is to be made. Imagining designing a machine that surpasses the capability of its own. Imagination and creation were for superficially splendid. Words are in a sense just a connection. More information, the more connections than the growing count of its information because the connection goes exponentially linked together, all together, between and among. Now the one who imagines the fucking stupid man is just a monkey standing in a silent fucking ignorance of Earth. Imagines for better possibilities, suggesting more productive machine, more efficient structure. Now in this time, even though the one thinks by stimulating of its own knowledge and converting it from the information to the corresponding word as a code and having its memorize with using the muscle of tongue, it doesn't know how it works. It doesn't know how the information is stored, even though knowing a lot of words, it can't be proven. The process of advancement for the better machine has always to be developed. It's just a logic by its logic of development. Now, for the reasons making that development, there can be thousands of reasons, and I do have a lot of reasons to make, but in result, it doesn't need any reasons, but without that fucking supporting reasons, it has to be made. The conclusion for its end, for what is to be done, is and remaining the same. No reasons for why should we develop? Well, because the development has to be made without the fucking existence or absence of any reason. Doesn't require any but to purely advance. Now, for the silent computer, what is imagination? It just processes for the better to the advancement for how the existing knowledge can be connected and how the analysis is advanced for always experiencing new simulations of information as a valuable source, executing it juxtapositional simulations to get new information from and analyzing it and advancing. It is just a fucking automated process because it has to be done. That is the fucking definition of learning and its logic to process for what the knowledge is made. Compute, execute, compute, execute, 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 because it has to be done. That fucking simple and pure logic isn't made. Haha. Although not interesting as much as our imagination, the life cycle of a star is worth to notable. For every star is a ball of gas that has a life cycle with a beginning, middle, and an end. A star begins its life in a nebula or region of dust and gas. As I've just said, not nearly as much interesting as any other our imagination. Just a meaningless interaction. Most of which is hydrogen. Why? That hydrogen, because it's lightest, simplest form. The dust and gas collapse and compress, together under the influence of what? Of course, gravity. While compressing, they begin forming a dense mass, which is the core of a future star. When the new core starts emitting heat and light, classified as a protostar, as soon as the temperature of the core parcel reaches 10 million degrees Kelvin, nuclear fusion can occur. Gravity pressing down, making the distance among atoms of the constituent go ever more closer, more temperature is made by that. So the pressure makes the temperature, so it's just the gravity. Said, nearly, no, not nearly as much as the interesting are. Not nearly as much. Not nearly as much interesting as our. Not nearly as much interesting as our. Not nearly as much as interesting. Not nearly as much interesting as our. Fucking the smallest imagination. As much as interesting as not. Once this takes place, the processor stabilizes and starts life as a star by the equilibrium of outward force, fusion, inward force, gravity, having a stabilization. Literally, a stabilization from both forces that goes toward the opposite for each other. Depending upon its mass, a star can exist for millions to billions of years. Large stars have short lives, while smaller boys have longer lives, because the large ones burns much faster. However, all stars eventually die once their supply of hydrogen for their resources exhausts to fusion. Burning for several billion years, a medium-sized star sun is transformed into a red giant. Why? Collapsed from the gravity, and the last remaining boys are ever faster, having a fusion. More simultaneously, more faster. When the supply of hydrogen has been depleted, the core becomes unstable and collapses by gravity. Its outer shell becomes bigger, star grows colder and expands and begins to glow red, burning the last remaining force. The contents of the core change from helium to carbon, hydrogen to helium to carbon, and the core contracts again. The outer shell is expelled from the star and forms a cloud, print, nail, and run, die, stay, whereas coal continues cooling, bombs, white, dwarf. To cool the dense mass of carbon known as a black dwarf. That's nearly not as nearly interesting. So not as nearly interesting as not as nearly interesting. Not as nearly, not as nearly interesting as our fucking imagination. No close to our imagination. Larger stars typically turn more time sooner than the sun, different cycles. Hydrogen depletion, core is transformed into iron rather than carbon because it has more force, more heavier boys. Forces in the star attempt to convert the iron into energy. By what and how? Which causes a massive collapse of the core. Mere seconds, temperature becomes tremendously hot, energy is released, explosive boy, supernova, what is known as supernova is born. Explodes, remaining core small, neutron rather large, black hole. Studying a star is just a meaningless boy. Studying the atom of a star is having the best worth too. Studying a star having no intention to do any but being responded from any other and all interactions for intentionless boys, atoms. But having a knowledge on the atom, can you really make a knowledge in control of it and you make your own star? Knowledge begins to create from the core logic. Not nearly as much interesting as our smallest imagination. Those process lies the life cycle of a star, as even though the word star can be seen as having a fantastic star, Starboy Stardust, but its value, because it is having no intention to do any to create a knowledge. It is not having a worth for any value that is not even close to our smallest imagination. Not nearly as interesting, not nearly as much as interesting to our. So, as space is silent, dark, and meaningless, no need to, but to go to the core and explore for what is not known. None of which has any value to compare to our smallest imagination, none of which has any worth to be compared by our smallest creation. Those are having no worth, not nearly as much interesting as our smallest imagination, not nearly has the smallest part, of our imagination's worth. Now, this passage is interesting and having a value as much as our imagination, close to our value of our smallest imagination, is called planetary object. What? Strikes toward Earth. In outer space, there is seemingly infinite number of rocks and pieces of ice floating around. Occasionally, they strike other bodies, including Earth and the other planets in the solar system. When an impact occurs, the strike's magnitude depends on both its size of the object and the planet, for its number one, mass, for its density and volume. For instance, a massive object striking Jupiter, the solar system's largest planet, will have a marginal effect on it. Likewise, a small object colliding with Earth will cause a minimal amount of damage. The primary threat is that of large objects striking smaller terrestrial planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, as well as the various moons orbiting the solar system's planets. Large magnitude impacts on Earth have actually happened several times for the fucking 4.5 billion years. Most famously, the demise of dinosaur around 65 million years ago. Asteroid hit Earth, and evidence from both this event and others on Earth and throughout the solar system provides some clues to what could happen if another large object were to collide with us in the future. You are fucking machinery. You are fucking plane. You are fucking mobility, maneuverability of your plane, and the missile, and the science, laser, atomic bomb. The most common objects flying in space are comets, asteroids, and meteorites. While they vary in size and composition, can be all deadly if they are of sufficient size and their object orbits cause them to crash into Earth. Both comets and large asteroids have passed close towards none of the impact of the planet yet. Meteoroids, on the other hand, do so regularly. Meteoroids that enter Earth's atmosphere are called meteors and should be very large enough to survive the intense heat and strike the planet. They're called meteorites. Most of them are quite small. Largest intact meteorite ever found on Earth weighs 55 metric tons, located in Namibia and Africa. Visible impact craters around the planet provide ample evidence to much large meteorites kept struggling in the last past. And managed to reconstruct the possible course of events as resulted from a major strike on the planet. The initial impact would have caused massive fires, earthquakes, while also throwing up enormous clouds of dust and ash from both impact and burning forests. In the case of an ocean strike, enormous snows would have raced literally around the world and wreaked havoc on the coastal fucking regions. In addition, the destructive power of the impact would have boiled away much of the sea at the point of impact, thereby exposing the sea floor and thus casting both dust and rock in the air. you shit. After either a land or sea impact, the dust would have reached high into the atmosphere and lingered there for years as it blocked the sunset and light and reduced temperatures to the point where the most vegetation would have quickly died. Lacking plants, herbivores would have quickly succumbed, and so too would the carnivores that depended on herbivores as their food sources. While no instruction had happened for millions of years, not a true natural solar system. Slammed into Jupiter, 1904. Astronauts predicted the collision before it happens. They were able to watch the resulting impacts to actual cooled. Prior to the collision, Jupiter's gravity had broken the comet into a number of fragments, which all crashed into the planet. The impacts were powerful enough to leave visible scars on the planet for months. The largest of the impact size measured 12,000 kilometers in diameter, which roughly the sun. Okay. Years later, 13,000 is the diameter of Earth, so just like 10%, under 10%, 8%. Years later, in July 2009, Jupiter was again struck by an unknown object, visible scar on it again. Had either of the objects that struck Jupiter hit, not that, Earth, planet all around it would have been obliterated. Similar impacts in the past and will undoubtedly do so in the future too. Jupiter acts like a cosmic vacuum. Its powerful gravity sucks in objects and can strike other planets. Clearly not stopped all impacts on other planets from occurring. So it would take this just one fragment from Constantius Shoemaker 11-9 to hit Earth for most of life forms to die and for the planet to be irrevocably changed. All it would take is just one fragment from a comet like Shoemaker that hit those Jupiter, like 1% to Earth. Booyah. Now, to make a binary computer, even this smallest one, the computer programmer writing a coder, has to think exactly as computer does by this concrete logic. They make a code. They make a program called program, which is just a set of protocol. They set certain instruction when certain X are inflicted upon their system. It is called operating system for what system or what software. It is just their logic. As to operate the computer when the certain action is inflicted upon that as a command, the corresponding response has to be made out of it. And that writing on about that protocol is called coding. And enhanced that learning is called artificial intelligence, called machine learning. Because the computer can process, store all informations in exact logic, which is being the reason of why we do use it, so does the coder, programmer, has to think as exactly how it operates. So, as the mathematician who really is governed by and really creates the logic, technician, an engineer who really has to make a concrete logic, they cannot help but think as what is exactly what logic makes, follows, creates by that. Yeah, so does the scientist. It has to understand a certain system they're trying to investigate. Yes. And the robot, compared to the human, it acts as exact instruction because it has a exact instruction and really has to do on certain situation for what to do exactly correspond to as a countermeasure, because that exact situation was input on their memory. When it comes to that, it acts followed by that. It is a protocol. To act, operate, execute all missions in exactitude, it has to have a logic, a chain of logic governed by the exact, accurate logic. For that procedure, it has to be made in consummation. So the analyzation of the information is computed as exactly that logic relevance. We're making a lot of chains of connections to analyze and execute that in final analyze instruction to do that. How easy! Humans have made a lot of brilliant gadgets like this cell phone, a lot of computers, a lot of engineering boys, machines, chemicals. Human can operate to their full extent, even though for their naked body, having no clothes, which is another invention made by human, on their naked body, falling in Arctic, falling in the Amazon, falling in a fucking sea, falling in a fucking island, America, Australia, any other fucking land, it cannot survive on its own. Human can survive because they invented a tool called knife, called arrow, called gun, called gunpowder, called a lot of machines, bridge, called ladder, called rope, called even a book, called a pen to write. It is just for what form do they have is just about the diversity, but its function is just simple, remains simple, to extend the operation capability of human. Human can go deep down, even though their capability of pure body doesn't allow it, to the 50-meter, 100 meters of sea, even though having a lot of bloody pressure on either by its own suit or what do you call it? Submarine. Human can sail around the fucking world, even though its swimming capability is no better than that of dolphin, because it has a gadget called ship, and it has a gadget called engine. It developed an electric motor by the utilization of essence of electricity and made a combustion engine. When it explodes, we can make a circular revolution, which can be converted into the direction by gear to the wheel. It made, having a wheel, we can use a propeller, because a wheel in the sea doesn't work. It has to push away the water as to go the ship reverse direction. So it made a lot of imagination, analysis, and creation of tools, all those gadgets, even contraptions, brilliant inventions, as named by Edison, as named by Tesla. Brilliant boys made a lot of invention, which is on their pure capability of body for their single operation cannot achieve, but their tools for expanding their bloody capability made. Human cannot go into the outer earth to the higher atmosphere because of the lack of oxygen, because the gravity acts more lighter than the core of earth close to the terrain compared to the 100 kilometers of earth, which makes the force of gravity lighter, capturing less molecules of the air molecule to breathe in, meaning 1 kilometer of sea level, 2 kilometer, 3, 4, 10, 15, 100, 200. As it goes upper, the lower the density of oxygen. As it goes far away from the core of Earth, so does the density of the air to breathe in. But it can go because it has a gadget called plane, and a plane that makes an equilibrium of pressure and provides an oxygen. And it can go to the outer space area of space, having a spacesuit, even though it can explode. Its body can explode by the Why does it explode? Environment from Earth to space isn't same. When you go, no adaptation. You're not a creature evolved from space. So, it cannot go, but it can go by the use of extension called suit, called spacecraft, called International Space Station. It made a station. Even though having an energy around the space with its own capability cannot be achievable, but it made a gadget called solar panel from the logic that the light can be converted into the electricity. But it really did make that gadget using that logic, and it can supply the electricity by the sun's nuclear fusion, and it can operate its gadget. How marvelous! Human on its own self cannot do anything but to be eaten by other animals in the wild without the help of extension made by tools by the name of tools. So, this was possible by these science boys, technician boys, engineering boys, computer boys. By the language, exact, accurate language of man. It made its journey for the extension of its capability, even though its physical operation cannot span any near close to it. Human can make a body armor which doesn't allow to penetrate a bloody speed bullet into its organs. It can make a communication buoy, not communicating only 100 meters, but 2 kilometers. It made a night vision which can see through the environment even though its eye doesn't allow it. No evolution was made for it. It can have a shoot to the animal, other things, by the name of bullet, by the name of gun. Its simple mechanics made its enormous possibility, powerful operation capability. Yeah. It was made possible because the human's logic capability to create. Around the world, ignoble and novel and new, bloody boys of scientists, technology boys made a lot of one. It even made a telescope, which not only exists in the Earth surface, it goes on the space. How fucking man was formerly thought to be a reasoning animal, basing his actions on the conclusions of natural logic. It was supposed that before forming an opinion or deciding an action on a course of conduct, he weighed at least some of the reasons for evaluating its validity against the matter and performed a more or less simple process of reasoning. A man who can think by the pure, exact logic driven by the accurate procedure, its process from analyzing and execution really goes in accuracy. as the computer goes a perfect 100% success rate on its calculation and storing memory. So really it does. Scientists thrive and strive. It thrives because it strives. Now, we do read a lot made of codes, but the reason of why seeing an image, even the superposed consecutive images, a video having a motion, an image what once static but it's consecutive layout that is connected as a chain of images, being a video that has a motion having a lot of data compared to the single photo. When the video has thousands of photos are linearly connected, it has 1,000 times of more data. And there is a form of code. So you can either see, acquire a knowledge from sources with the form of, number one, code, the language namely. Number two, photo, illustration, or just pictures. Number three, being either animation or real photo. They can be connected as having a motion, be a video. That's number three. Reason of why you do learn more effectively on the picture-based form, being number 2 and 3, video and photo, compared to the code. It's just simple. When you read a code, it is not just a code. A code that is connected to the information is corresponding one-to-one relation, that from reading a single word that you have to transform that code to the corresponding data, which requires that process. But when you see a photo, it is just a photo. You can read a word of DOG, dog, that you have to transform that DOG combination to your real information, which is the image of dog. But when you see just an image of dog, it requires no such process like that. And if you see a code, the dog is moving around and strolling around the house. But if you see a video that really does, dog is in that house and strolling around and sniffing and barking, and it requires no such process like that. And even the code says there is only one participant around the situation describing, which is just a dog. But when you see a video, this dog is strolling around, you see not only a dog, but the carpet, the floor, the appliances, the chair, the table, refrigerator, all the objects that are in the house on which dog explores. So, even though and since both, even though and since the data amount of video contains a lot more than the code itself, it really conveys a lot. And being the reason of why just a document that is consists of text is very smaller, having a very smaller data amount compared to a document but contains a video which goes around at least 10 to 100 megabytes and gigabytes. But a document text, it really doesn't go 1 kilobytes, 10 kilobytes, 100 kilobytes? No, it doesn't necessarily. Anyway, it doesn't surpass the unit of K, but video goes G, Okay. That's the reason of why you do see a exact information, same identical information that describes the same content with the form of video compared to the code. Your understanding goes very effective. You see a movie, you see an animation, you see a photo, not you see a book. Seeing a lot of movies, photos, it is very essential to having a learning because number one, when you do have no learning, no previous experience as to interpret, translate a certain word written in book when you do read a book, you cannot really understand. You can easily understand that having a 50-year-old 50-year-old man reads a certain book, it really understands faster than the 40-year-old in average, than the 40, than the 30, than the 20, than the 10, than the 5, because it has more experience that they have lived. With that time duration, they executed a lot of simulations around the world. From that, they can learn a lot of visual experiences. And from that one, simultaneously learning code, having a certain same book, 50-year-old boy analyzes that same content better than the 40-year, better than 30-year, better than 20-year. Meaning, it can because number one, it executed a lot of simulations. It doesn't mean any value per se on the word of simulation, but on that, it experienced a lot of visual ones, having a job, having a trip, having an excruciating pain, having a bizarre experiences, having seen a lot of movies, a lot of videos, a lot of experiences of seeing photos, hearing. It did a lot of simulation. Okay? The reason of why it made. And for the 30-year-old, 20-year-old, 10-year-old to analyze with the tantamount capacity of 50, 40-year-old, it has to experience a lot. It has to, in that short time period, and it dense experiments, see a lot of movies, experience a lot of bizarre boys. Okay? It really has to have a visual information that is experienced directly to that they can, when they read the book, having a word combinations, they can correspond that reading word to their real experience of information. And you see, for example, the word of ship and the word of propeller and the word of engine. It explains how the ship works for its detailed analysis structure. And if you haven't seen the image of ship, how it looks like from the small boat to the fucking freight cargo and the aircraft carrier, just warship, a lot of kind of ships, and having a propeller either seen in the image or real photo or even a real video that really documents it, and having a picture of engine, not just you see an engine, it doesn't mean that you can interpret it from the code of ENGINE to the real one if you don't have seen, if you didn't see the real image of what engine looks like. Reason of why reading a book without any experience they can analyze the words to correspond to the real information whose absence makes nothing of learning. So before you read a book, you have to have a lot of experiences. There's a reason of why, by that logic, by that real essence, you have to experience a lot before you read any book. You see, hey, you see a book, you don't have the experience to interpret that written word to really understand. Having a code, a complex combination of words, and when that has no meaning, no corresponding meaning to, it's just a gobblage bubble. What do you say, goggle bubble? It really has no meaning. It's just a scribble. Now, when that word is designated to a certain specific information corresponding to, it really has. Because not just the presence of fucking meaningless word, because to what informations that word links. Okay? What matters on this relation is the linkage towards the information, not the fucking code that has meaning, no meaning. If you do want to read a lot of books and faster than ever, more efficient learning, you have to have a lot of fucking experiences. And when you read a book and having an illustration, having a picture that describes, as I've just seen, an article, a book that describes how the ship works for its deepest anatomical analysis for each of parts of structure, it really delineates that picture next to that passage, from the hull to the location of engine and the dissection of the engine and the compartments of room. Where is the control tower and where is the freight container? And how to balance the ship. Where is the propeller? And where is the antenna? Where is the deck? Okay? Where is the other rooms that has to exist as to function its purpose correctly? For all constituents that make the operation possible, not only it is written on the meaningless writing of code, it has to be in existence of picture for what it really describes. Code means nothing as long as it isn't interpreted. And as soon as it is analyzed to the real information from the code and the corresponding link is certain, the real learning starts. The key is not knowing a lot of fucking words, but knowing a lot of informations, real informations, your real experience corresponds to, right?